What if the feeling of superiority wasn't a secret virtue, but a slow, acting poison, corroding everything it touches? Empathy, justice, even our humanity.
Imagine for a moment that the worst kind of evil isn't the obvious kind, the cruel,
violent, or outrageous, but rather the kind that disguises itself as morality, the kind that makes you feel better than others, more enlightened, more ethical, more evolved. This is the trap Dostoevsky masterfully exposes in Crime and Punishment.
A bright young man, Raskolnikov, with bold ideas and his own moral code, convinces himself that certain people stand above the law, that some, by being extraordinary, have the right to cross lines that would be unacceptable for everyone else. He believes he's beyond good and evil, that killing an old pawnbroker would be an act of justice, a greater good. But what happens when we believe we're too superior to follow the rules everyone else must obey? That's where our journey begins. We're not here just to dissect a 19th century Russian novel. We're here to look in the mirror, because maybe, at some level, we've all felt above someone else, more righteous, more aware, more right. And that's where the real danger lies, not in evil, but in the certainty of our own goodness. So take a deep breath. What comes next isn't comfortable, but it is necessary. Let's walk through it together. Raskolnikov isn't a classic villain.
He doesn't enjoy violence.
He's a young man hungry for meaning, crushed by a world of misery, injustice, and mediocrity. And from that pain, a dangerous idea is born. What if he was different? What if some people were destined to change the world, and therefore shouldn't be judged by the same standards as everyone else? That thought both fascinates and haunts him. He even writes an article defending the idea of extraordinary men who have the right, or even the duty, to break from conventional morality. Men like Napoleon, who shaped history by walking over corpses. So why couldn't Raskolnikov be one of them? The problem is, this pride isn't born from power. It's born from powerlessness, from the fear of being insignificant. And that's why it's so seductive. It dresses up the ego as courage, as altruism, as a kind of intellectual nobility that in reality is just vanity in disguise. Philosopher Hannah Arendt, in her analysis of Nazi crimes, warned of the danger of the banality of evil when ordinary people commit atrocities believing they're doing the right thing. It's a warning that echoes Raskolnikov's story. Evil doesn't
need to look monstrous.
It can wear logic, a noble cause, a high-minded intention. Raskolnikov believes he's doing good, but what he's really doing is running from himself. He wants to kill the old woman, yes, but what he truly wants to eliminate is the feeling of insignificance she represents. And here begins the real punishment, not from the law, but from within. Raskolnikov's greatest prison isn't made of bars, but of thought. The more he clings to his superiority, the more isolated he becomes. His relationships with friends, family, even strangers, start to lose their humanity. Everything becomes calculation, justification, analysis, and that's the most perverse effect of pride disguised as intelligence. It turns people into pawns, not persons. When we see ourselves as superior, we stop truly listening. We stop looking others in the eye. We forget that they, too, carry pain, doubt, and dignity. Raskolnikov talks a lot, but he doesn't really communicate. Every word, every gesture is calculated, like he's building a wall between himself and the world. But the wall doesn't protect him, it isolates him. Superiority, in this case, isn't strength, it's exile. How many times have you felt something like that? Not out of malice, but as a form of self-defense. When pride becomes a shield, it also becomes a cell. The mind starts spinning inward, crafting arguments that push people away and theories that harden the heart. That's when we realize Raskolnikov's true punishment isn't immediate guilt, it's growing loneliness. A loneliness born from constant judgment, endless comparison, and the refusal to admit that we're all just humans, trying to get it less wrong. And it's precisely when he starts to shed that arrogance, when he allows himself to feel shame, pain, love, that something inside him begins to change. There's a moment when the crime fades, but the punishment remains. There's no more blood, no more body, but there's a weight, a discomfort that grows in the silence. Raskolnikov begins to live with a free body and a ruined soul. The guilt he feels doesn't come from outside, not a judge, not a cop, not even society. It's his own mind, his own conscience becomes the harshest court. Every thought, a sentence, every memory, an accusation. And the most unbearable part is, he can't escape himself. This is where Dostoevsky reveals something deep. The real punishment isn't the prison cell, it's the mind. And the more we try to justify our actions, the more they eat us alive. It's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Pride only fuels the pain. Carl Jung, in his work on the shadow, said that everything we reject in ourselves ends up controlling us. And maybe that's exactly what happens with Raskolnikov. He rejects his weakness, his powerlessness, his humanity. And that's why they take over. His arrogance collapses in the face of the pain he created himself. Little by little, he stops trying to defeat his suffering and starts listening to it. And at that moment, the punishment begins to transform, not because the pain goes away, but because he finally stops running from it. It's the beginning of surrender. And every redemption starts there. There's a silent myth that runs through our culture and hides in our deepest beliefs. The myth of the lone hero. The one who, by sheer genius or bravery, walks ahead of his time, misunderstood by all, justified by his mission. Raskolnikov wants to be that hero. And Dostoevsky, with brutal honesty, tears that illusion apart page by page, because there is no real heroism in arrogant superiority, no salvation in standing above others. There is only pain, isolation, delusion. That fantasy isn't about courage, it's about pride, about the childish desire to be special. And there's something deeply human about that. Who hasn't wanted to be seen as exceptional? The problem isn't dreaming big, the problem is using that dream to justify disdain for others. In his essays, Montaigne reminds us that wisdom lies in self-acceptance, in the lightness of not placing yourself above or below anyone. True greatness, he says, doesn't shout, it lives quietly, it isn't imposed, it's shared. Raskolnikov tries to impose, and fails. Because the real world doesn't respond to tragic hero fantasies. It responds to empathy, humility, vulnerability, and only when he lets go of the grand performance does he begin to awaken. The fall of the lone hero is the birth of the whole human. In a world obsessed with strength, merit, and dominance, Sonia is almost invisible, fragile, poor, marginalized. To society, she has little value. And yet, that's exactly why she's so powerful. Sonia doesn't try to seem strong. She is, because she faces life as it is, without masks. She loves even when she's rejected. She embraces even when she's excluded. And most importantly, she sees Raskolnikov fully, not as a criminal, not as a tragic hero, but as a broken man, confused and still human. Sonia gives him what no one else can, not judgment, but compassion, not answers, but presence. And it's that silent, almost invisible presence that begins to erode Raskolnikov's pride more deeply than any philosophy ever could. A Harvard Business School study found that genuine empathy, not performative sympathy, but the real ability to sit with someone in their pain, is one of the most transformative tools in human relationships. Sonia is that tool in human form. She doesn't try to fix Raskolnikov. She simply stays. And that changes everything. Maybe Dostoevsky's greatest lesson is this: what saves us isn't strength or intelligence, but the ability to love what is imperfect. And only those who have faced their own pain can offer that kind of love. With her quiet faith and unwavering tenderness, Sonia reminds us true strength never makes a sound. Translation continues in the next message. Part 2, continued translation. The classic image of redemption is misleading. A dramatic moment, a heroic gesture, a catharsis, and everything is resolved. But true redemption, the kind that transforms, not just soothes, is slow, painful, and often silent. Raskolnikov doesn't find redemption when he's arrested, not when he confesses, not even when he begins to accept Sonia's love. Real redemption begins when he stops resisting himself, when he stops trying to justify his crime with theories, when he truly begins to feel the weight of the life he took and the life he almost lost, his own. In that moment, he's no longer trying to be extraordinary. He's simply trying to be human. And ironically, that takes far more courage, because now he's not fighting the world, he's facing the pride he built within himself. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that suffering is the thread that weaves consciousness, that only when our soul is wounded do we begin to understand what truly matters. And that's what Raskolnikov experiences. He doesn't become good, he becomes aware. That's the real process of redemption. Not erasing the past, but integrating it. Not pretending we didn't fail, but allowing failure to become growth. Pain as the seed of a new ethic. And in the end, maybe that's what Dostoevsky invites us to do. Not to seek redemption like some magical absolution, but to walk with our flaws every day towards something more honest. There's something deeply uncomfortable about confronting our own pride, because unlike other flaws like fear, insecurity, or sadness, pride hides. It disguises itself as certainty, as moral conviction, as consistency. That's why it's so hard to spot. It convinces us it's protecting us, when in fact it's pushing us away from others. Raskolnikov spends most of the story trying to prove something, but he doesn't quite know what. And maybe that's the clearest symptom of pride. It demands constant affirmation even when there's no real enemy. It needs to win even when there's no war. And why is that so common in all of us? Because admitting we're proud is, in a way, confessing we're
Afraid. Afraid of not being seen. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being ordinary.
An article from the New York Times called this the moral superiority bias. Our tendency to believe our intentions are purer, our choices more ethical, our character more elevated than others. This bias doesn't just distort our worldview, it builds invisible walls between us and everyone else. And how do we break those walls? With brutal honesty, with humility that doesn't dress itself in false modesty, with the kind of silence that listens instead of the voice that insists on being right. Dostoevsky doesn't invite us to be perfect. He invites us to be honest, because only when we recognize our pride does it stop controlling us. In the end of Crime and Punishment, it's not prison that transforms Raskolnikov. It's love. It's the realization that his arrogance was deep down fear. It's the encounter with the pain he caused and the pain he had always carried. The old belief that punishment redeems falls apart. What redeems is the confrontation with one's own humanity. Dostoevsky didn't write a manual on crime. He wrote a mirror. And this mirror challenges us because it doesn't show us monsters. It shows us the most ordinary, the most familiar, the most intimate thing of all, our tendency to see ourselves as morally superior. Maybe the deepest lesson this novel offers is this: there is no superior human being. There is only a human being in process. And every process is fragile, contradictory, imperfect, just like Raskolnikov, just like us. The way out of the moral maze isn't proving we're better. It's admitting we're flawed and still choosing to do good anyway. It's recognizing that the other person, no matter how distant they seem, also suffers, also stumbles, also dreams. The true punishment isn't making mistakes, it's refusing to learn from them. And the true crime isn't falling, it's refusing to get back up. Through his brutal and compassionate literature, Dostoevsky offers us an invitation, not to perfection, but to sincerity, not to rigid morality, but to radical humility. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we need most today. If you've made it this far, maybe something in you was touched too. Maybe you remembered a moment when you judged or were judged. Maybe you recalled that subtle, almost invisible feeling of being above someone else. We've all been there, and we all have the chance to do differently. Raskolnikov's journey at its core is our own, because no matter how far we go, how right we think we are, there's always something to learn about ourselves. And sometimes the greatest lesson is simple: step down from the pedestal, walk beside others, listen before responding, love before understanding. If this message made you reflect, share it in the comments. What was a moment when you realized you were judging without noticing? Or when someone looked at you with compassion, especially when you didn't think you deserved it? Your story might help someone else recognize themselves too. And that's what we're trying to do here: create space for truth, connection, and what's deeply human. If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Here we talk about what no one wants to admit, but everyone feels. And if you want to keep reflecting, watch this video right here. It'll take you
even deeper on this journey. I'll see you there with care and with truth. Until next time.